Hey everyone, thanks for joining us as we take a couple of weeks to look at the book of Malachi. I love the book of Malachi, and I think as we look at it from a perspective of what does this say and what does this mean for my life. I think it's going to be important for us to check this out and just give God an opportunity to speak to us about a book that's kind of, we don't give a lot of attention to. And we're going to look at it from a perspective that we call devotional. Devotional means this is not like in-depth study of every little detail. We're looking at it to see it from the perspective of what does this message have for my life? Now, anytime we look at the Old Testament, it's important for us to understand that the Bible has really kind of got three parts. There's got the Old Testament, and it's got the Gospels and the New Testament. We kind of think of the Gospels as part of the New Testament, but it helps to think of them in three different phases: the Old Testament, the Gospels, and the New Testament. And the Old Testament is really serving to help us understand the need for the Gospels, the need for Jesus, God, to become a man and to live out his life on earth and then to die this excruciating sacrificial death. And then we've got the teaching after that, which is really about how the church should live and operate in this world and the rest of what God's going to do in history. So when we go back to the Old Testament, our tendency is to look at it as if it's written exactly to us. And that's not entirely true. It's really written for us. It's written for our benefit, but it was written to the people of Israel. And so as we look at anything from the Old Testament, there's really kind of four major things that we can understand as we look at any teaching from the Old Testament. The first is that it's setting the stage for us to understand the condition of humanity, that something's off, that everything's not as it should be. And so there's an issue with the condition of humanity. We've got something wrong with how we operate. There's a virus, there's a disease called sin, and it's just messed up the world and it's messed us up. And so there's a need for somebody to come fix that. So that's the first one. It's dealing with the conditions, or it's dealing with some principles. It's helping us to understand some things that are really important to God and important how this world works and how really what he wants. Or it's teaching us how to praise God. It's teaching us how we can appreciate who God is and what he's done. Or the fourth one is it's just establishing a timeline. It's establishing the story and what God's doing. So anytime we look at the Old Testament, it's typically doing one of those four things. The book of Malachi is really going to hone in on that first one, that issue of the condition. And it's serving as this diagnostic, this MRI of here's what's wrong with humanity, and there's going to be a need for a solution. And so in order to bring that message, the book of Malachi is written to the people of Israel, and it's this messenger named Malachi, or some people joke around, call him Malachi, the Italian prophet, but I'm going to go with Malachi. Malachi is sending this message to the nation of Israel that something's not right. And it's a powerful message from a guy whose name literally means messenger. In his book opens with, he's got this burden to share this message. And honestly, like if you have this in mind, if you have a conversation between a parent and a rebellious teen, that's the conversation between God and the nation of Israel. Their behavior's off, they've been disrespectful, they're being rude and unloving to a whole bunch of people, and they're being selfish. And God's having this conversation with them to essentially say, you think the problem is the rest of the world, but really you'd be wise to stop and look at yourself. And so God's going to confront them. The biblical word is rebuke. It's this confrontation with a correction attached to it. And so as we take a step back and see the bigger picture, I want us to see sort of the rebellion. So God had a covenant and agreement with the nation of Israel where he would bless them incredibly. He was just going to just again and again bless them. As long as they were a messenger for him to the other nations around, they were the light in the darkness. And so God's deal with them was, as long as you represent me accurately, you don't even have to be perfect. There's a sacrificial system for any time you fail. But as long as you represent me and keep me as number one and you don't worship any other God, then I'll bless you incredibly. But if you start to worship other gods and start to pursue other things more than me, then I'm going to discipline you. So this was that sort of blessing and discipline situation all throughout the Old Testament. And we're going to pick up the story where God had disciplined them. He took them and put them in a foreign nation. And so now they've come to their senses. They've realized they've been brought back to the promised land. They're back in the house again. And all of a sudden, the same old behavior kicks in, and it's worse than before. And the downward spiral has gotten to rock bottom. And so you've got God, the loving parent, and you've got Israel, the rebellious teen, and they've not learned their lesson. And sort of there's this disconnect as this rebellious teen is just failing after area after area, making ethical compromises in just the key places in marriage, in what they do with their finances, and what they teach, and how they treat those who are disadvantaged in life. And so God comes along through the messenger of Malachi to interact with us. And we're going to look at this over the next couple of sessions where different teachers from our Susquehanna Valley Church teaching team are going to share different teachings on the passages throughout as we work through this book. But really, the whole thing is built on this discussion between rebellious teen and loving parent, and where there's disputes. And there's a series of disputes where the rebellious teen is saying, this isn't fair because of this. And then God's going to say, you say this isn't fair, but let me tell you what's real, and let me tell you what actually is going on here. And so the kind of the premise of the book is this major dispute where Israel, this rebellious teen, is going, you've stopped loving me. You haven't loved me in the way that I want to be loved. And so really just kind of looking around and saying, God, where's the love? And God's looking around at this society that is falling apart, and he's essentially saying, I haven't stopped loving you for a second, but your actions have put you into a place where society has kind of crumbled because of you. And so what you're experiencing is not the lack of my love, it's your own natural consequences for your behavior. It's kind of like this. If you were standing in a room and you put a blindfold on, and then all of a sudden you said, who turned out the lights? We'd say, well, nobody turned out the lights. You put a blindfold on. Israel is standing in the nation of Israel in front of God in this dispute. And they're going, God, you don't love me. And it's like they're saying, God, you turned out the lights. And God's going, you put a blindfold on. And the way that you handle your marriages, and the way that you handle your finances, the way that you handle teaching, the way that you love those who are disadvantaged in life, it's just you putting on this kind of moral blindfold. It's not that I've been indifferent to you. It's that you've been indifferent to all the things that are really important to me. See, we all love when it's somebody else's fault. We all love when somebody else is to blame. Even just driving in this morning, I pulled up to an intersection and I pulled out like a foot too far into the intersection. And a guy coming this way, kind of had to swerve around and gave me an angry face. And my immediate natural thought was, well, you shouldn't have been going so fast. As opposed to, I shouldn't have been out a foot. I should have stopped sooner. We all love when it's someone else's fault. And Israel's going, God, it's your fault. It's your fault. And God sends Malachi to basically say, no, look at your own life and look at your own choices. You've stopped behaving in a way that allows you to experience the blessings of my love. Your own actions have precluded you from enjoying my love. See, I think of it like this. It's like God's covenant with them was this incredible garden just filled with all the fruits and vegetables they could ever desire. And it's just there and it's just teeming with life. And for some reason, Israel decided that in order to get what they wanted to satisfy their appetite, they left the garden. They went to look elsewhere outside of this garden that was God's blessing. And they get out there and they're in just this wasteland of life, and there's nothing to eat, nothing to satisfy, no vegetables, no fruit, nothing that's just going to give them any substance or energy. And they're in this wasteland and they're going, this place isn't what it used to be. This is God, what's going on? This isn't like it used to be. Why don't we have all the things that we used to have? And God's going, you're not in the garden. You've chosen to walk outside of the garden. My love has not ceased, but your own moral choices have caused you to look for satisfactions outside of the areas and the parameters where I've chosen to bless people. And so you're going, God, where's the fruit? Where's Where's the garden? And God's going, you're not even in the right place. And Jesus says it this way in John 15. He says, if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. For Jesus and for God, love is something we remain in. And we can choose to walk in or out of that. He'll never, ever, ever stop loving us, not for a second. But we can live a life that prevents us from being able to enjoy the very love that we so long for. And Malachi is basically saying to the nation of Israel, come back into the garden. Stop treating each other this way. Stop behaving. Stop being greedy. Stop being ruthless. Come back to the garden and you'll experience and live in love. See, really, if you don't feel loved by God, the message of the Bible would begin with the reality that the process of discovery should start with your own behavior. Maybe your own behavior has taken you outside the garden. And Jesus and his Spirit are saying, come back. This is beautiful. This is waterfall of love. But if you choose to stand aside from it, you won't experience the blessings of it. And so have you respected what's important with God? Has what's important to him been important to you? Have you walked with integrity? And those are the things that are going to allow you to experience and enjoy his love. He'll never stop loving you, but you might, by your own choice, stop to live inside of that love. Because we go through the book of Malachi, I hope that's a real draw for you to come back to the thing that you desperately need to live within the framework of God's love.